is kind of like going to church, isn't it? Like it's people, and all of a sudden everybody gets quiet. But it's not exactly like going to church, coming in here.
Are you about to sing, Mayor?
Just so you know.
You about to sing?
Yes, sermon.
All right, 7 o'clock. Okay, welcome everybody, and thanks very much for coming out to our meeting tonight. And I'd like to start with the Aboriginal Acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge the land in which we are gathered is the traditional territory of the Tana, Silix, and Sinix peoples, and is home to Métis and many diverse Aboriginal persons. We honour their connection to the land and rivers and respect the importance of the environment to our strength as a community. And with that, I'd like to know if there are any late items. I don't believe there are. And I'd like to make one change to the agenda for 10A. We're short some information, so we'd like to pull that from the agenda if that's okay with council. And with that, I'd like a motion to adopt the agenda as presented with the deletion of 10A. Moved by Councillor Charwood, second by Councillor Page. All in favour? Carried. Thanks very much. So we want to adopt the minutes of the previous meetings, and we have two in front of us here from the 12th of July 22 and the 9th of August 22.
I'll move those.
Councillor Woodward, second by Councillor Renwick. All in favour? Carried. There are no recommendations from the committee of the whole meeting, and the next item on the agenda is 7A, which is Latimer Street Temporary Use Permit. The city has received an application for a temporary use permit from the owner of the Nelson Brewing Company, located at 514 Latimer Street. The applicant currently operates a brewery and a tasting room, which falls under the industrial light use permit of M1 Industrial Zone. The applicant would like to amend the current liquor license to a lounge license, which would essentially allow them to sell more than beer samples. And right here, folks, there is a staff recommendation and an information package that goes along with it. And I'm looking for somebody to move the staff recommendation. Councillor Charwood, second by Councillor Renwick. Okay, any questions or comments?
Yeah, I'd like to speak to it. I like that this is a temporary use permit. I'm really curious to see how that works out in the community because it's increasing liquor consumption in a residential area. But I could make assumptions. So I like the idea of supporting local business, giving them the opportunity to try a new business model. And I'm grateful that it's a temporary use so we can see what the community's reaction is. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Page.
I did have a question about where the conditions are coming from, specifically about the hours. Now I can, on its face, understand we might want to have limited hours, but at the same time, as we try and bring a vibrancy to, a different area of the city, which is on a pretty busy drag up to the hospital in the first place, is this 9 p.m. coming from us? Is it coming from the proponent? Are we?
It came from both. It came from a conversation around what their identified needs are. I think at the moment it's 7 or 8 p.m. depending on the season. Mm-hmm. And they thought 9 p.m. was reasonable. And at the same time, I think we didn't hear anything negative from the community, but I think I anticipated potentially that the community would be asking, like, what's the guarantee that we have that this won't be going on too late? Mm-hmm. So I think from a neighborhood perspective, I think 9 o'clock is a reasonable time and it worked for the proponent. So that's where it comes from.
Okay.
Thank you. So with that, unless there's further questions, we're asking the council to approve the temporary use permit, file number 2206001.
Mayor.
Sorry, I didn't
It's
see
okay.
your hand
No,
up.
I'm sorry. I thought you saw my hand. I don't have any questions. I want to say that I actually really support this. For the first time ever, I went in there since they've had the ability to serve liquor. And just in maybe an answer to your concern, Councillor Charles, what I found was we sat outside and we just watched, and a lot of people were coming on their e-bikes to pick up because they can buy beer, so they pick up a little four-pack
growlers,
or
yeah.
whatever. And there was a lot of people walking, and a few people came with a stroller and came in, and because all they can serve is the flights of beer, and had a flight. So I see this really being much more of really like a neighborhood pub. Can we call it that? It's going to have very limited seating. It's a very small area. And I think it's just so funny is that I was in there last week, and then we get the agenda, and I'm like, wow, that was kind of interesting to end up on the agenda, because I just actually talked to the person that was serving us, and they were saying, stay tuned, something more is coming. And I guess, well, I got home to read the stay tuned, something more is coming. But I fully support this. I think it'll be a nice addition to the neighborhood.
John?
Thank you. So with that, I'll start from the beginning. Sorry? Councillor Page, you already had a kick at this cat. You want to do
We're
it?
going to kick it twice, if I may.
Yeah.
You may.
One of the questions I had, I kind of sat on it a little bit, but listening to the traffic, when we look at some of the diagrams and stuff that were provided in terms of where parking amenities are going, I found myself wondering, what about the active transportation pieces? I know we have a nice sidewalk on the other side of the street, but this building finds itself right up above seeing easements. Do we take this as an opportunity to ask for or push for improvements upon the boulevard in that area? It's other pieces that might allow us to take back what is historically been provided within those easements to create a streetscape that's more has more continuity and more amenities for people who want to move around, and I think in the long term would be of a benefit to a neighborhood pub versus
Yeah.
just all the parking directly in front.
Yeah, I think normally I would say yes, 100%. I think there'd be a couple of pretty long curb cuts anyways for vehicles to access some of the little parking and the drop-off zones and things like that. And I think that kind of informal space does serve the building well for people to kind of pop in and out, and so it gives them like 2-3 informal spaces, which I think work fairly well. I think it's something that we could consider in the future after 3 years, if this thing is really going well, and we could, we're at the same time we're improving the street frontage on Latimer for various reasons. I think that's when we would tackle it. I just don't think that would be the right thing to do at this moment. I think we kind of just want to feel it out, see how it goes. And I think, yeah, I hear you, there's a bit of a missing link, but we've got the sidewalk on the other side, and we'd have to renovate the whole block. So it'd be a substantial amount of work to do that sidewalk. So I wouldn't tie it to this temporary use permit. I would say, like, just have a look, and in the future, if we feel like there's truly missing a link there, we address it.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thanks,
Thank you.
Sebastian. Thanks, Councillor Page. Okay, that the council approved the temporary use permit file number 2206001 to allow the applicant to operate a neighborhood pub in existing tasting room space located on lots 3, 10, Block 4, Plan NEP 9500, District Lot 95, Land District, with the following conditions: that the maximum occupancy of use of a neighborhood pub be limited to 30 people, and that the hours of operation be limited to 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. All in favor? Carried. Thanks very much. What's wrong with expanding a pub? It's a good thing. Okay. What we got up next here? Nelson District Arts Council request. Nelson District Arts Council has hosted the Nelson International Mural Festival over the last 5 years and is planning to continue doing so annually for the foreseeable future. To support the festival, the Nelson District Arts Council is requesting funding from the city in the amount of $25,000 for the next 5 years. And I won't go into too many more details on this here, but there's an extensive package like there always is. And there's a recommendation in front of us, but we have a little bit of background that you can add to that. So if you want to introduce yourself and give us a little bit of background.
Absolutely. So I'm Sydney Black. I'm the Executive Director of the Nelson and District Arts Council. And in 2018, we had the very good fortune of having city support to initiate the first annual Nelson International Mural Festival. We've managed to grow the funding that we've been able to access from about $98,000 that first year to over $240,000 this year. A lot of that funding, the majority of that funding, is from public sources. So we seek out funds from Canada Council, Canadian Heritage. It's not only funding for murals, we also have a full 3-day music festival that's incorporated in that funding as well. And so we receive specific funding to hire local musicians, specific funding to hire musicians from away. And then we also receive funding from private business owners and building owners who want to see their buildings beautified. We've had great success in the last 5 years with eradicating graffiti off of the majority of the spaces that we've used. And I did, too late, probably send you all a little clip that we had made in the last couple weeks, and so it shows all the before and afters, and it shows that we're not painting on immaculate pieces of brick or anything like that. These are all walls that have quite a bit of graffiti on them, have large gray squares all over them, and when you kind of see that before and after, you can really appreciate the difference that it makes. We've been really fortunate, knock on wood, that we've only had one of our pieces be defaced in the entire time that this has happened, and we have a fairly substantial fund that is in our reserve so that if anything happens, we deal with all of the the cleanup and anything like that so that we can make sure that these pieces stay beautiful. We've also started to use anti-graffiti coating in the last couple of years. So a good majority of the pieces that we have are coated. And so that if there is graffiti, we're able to wash it right off with a little pressure washer. So that's a pretty sweet advancement and takes less time to maintain it. So that's kind of where we're at. Our staff has grown. We started with 3 staff and 4 musicians, and this year we had a staff of 6 and then 10 additional contractors who worked with us, and we hired over 50 musicians. So so things have grown quite substantially. I'm incredibly proud and very, very grateful for my awesome team who helped make it happen.
Thank you very much. Excellent. So with that, there's a recommendation.
I'll move that.
Move the recommendation by Councillor Renwick that the city provide, seconded by Councillor Charlwood, that the city provide a grant for $25,000 annually to the Nelson District Arts Council for purpose of holding a mural fest in the years of 2023 to 2027, and the funding be provided through the Downtown Reserve. Further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favour?
Question? I think there was maybe another one too. So you guys have been quite successful at converting quite a lot of wall space over the last few years with these beautiful pieces, and I was at the festival portion of the Mural International Mural Festival this year, and you had great artists, really brought Hall Street alive. And so my question, reflecting back what I'm hearing from members of the community, not certainly but there's members, there's a cohort of people, is the impact of that space over time cumulatively on the urban fabric, and how do we approach the continued growth of more walls? And I touched on it in our last conversation of how do we renew these? How do we go back? Are we just going to get growth upon growth upon growth of murals, and is that necessarily a positive impact on our heritage city in terms of how our streetscapes look without walls completely covered in art all the time? And I kind of prepared you that I would ask a question like this, but I do want to know what the long-term vision is to manage those subjective tastes between the community, so everybody has a place within the festival like this if we're going to continue to go on with.
Absolutely. So we completely avoid painting on any sort of heritage brick. So we're not actually transforming any of the heritage assets in the community. So that's something that we really focus on. So anything that we do paint on is something that's either, if it is brick, it's been covered over before, or there's graffiti that's currently on it. And also the festival is so much more than just the murals at this point, and there's lots of things that we're looking at, like looking at an augmented reality portion and kind of bringing in that digital art aspect to it. It also depends a lot on the tastes of the business and building owners of the community, because we don't go out and actively solicit people to let us paint on their walls. These are all individuals who are coming to us, who are saying, hey, I have this back wall, there's graffiti all over the back of it, like, we want to give you money to make this happen. And so I think that every year I keep waiting for the tastes to kind of die down. And I'm like, well, you know, with the city's funding, we can do 1 or 2 murals on public walls. And that's kind of where I set myself up every year to work from. And then every year we just get more and more humans who are like, we want this on our building that they own. And so it's so I think it kind of depends on what the community wants, and we look at that a lot.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Councillor Morrison, do you have a question? No. Okay. All in favour? Carried. Sydney, thanks very much for all your good work.
Thank you
Appreciate
very
it.
much for your time.
I don't know if it's my imagination, but are the murals getting, I don't mean this as any disrespect, but are they getting better every year?
Yeah.
Look to me like they're like amazing. Like
It's
some of
pretty
the ones
incredible.
that-
And this year, I must say, was like a very mural heavy year, because we had 3 murals that we had on the back burner from the pandemic. So we definitely had more projects than we are used to having. And so I don't foresee us creating 11 murals a year moving forward, you know. And also my team was like, no more summers like this. It was a very, very busy summer. So I anticipate that we'll probably, you know, and again, it's all funding dependent, but we'll definitely pull back from where we were at this year. And there was just so much COVID relief funding. And the whole purpose of that is that we are putting that money back into the community, into the artists' hands. And that's what that relief funding was for. And so we took that very, very seriously and made sure we spent it all. So, so I don't see that it will continue to grow. But yes, the quality of art is amazing. And the artists that are finding us, and we're starting to really, we have a little space on the international stage. It's this very, very special community where artists are used to painting in these concrete jungles, where they're in Toronto or LA or Miami. And then they come here. I get goosebumps even talking about it. They fly in and you pick them up at the Castlegar airport and they're like, where am I? Like, where am I? What am I doing here? And so the more higher quality artists that hear about us and that come and paint, then they tell all their friends, you know? So now we have the head of South Asian Arts Studies at Harvard who painted the Parkade this year. Imagine telling all of her friends, she paints all around the world. Like, you know, she's done almost 100 murals. And so she's telling all of her amazing friends, you have to come to Nelson. It's so beautiful. It's wild to be there. So it's pretty special to be able to offer this in this community.
I was amazed when I looked at the program this year. There was artists here from all over the world, really. It's incredible.
Yeah, we're very, very fortunate. So thank you for your support.
Thank you very much.
Great.
Okay, up next is the permissive tax exemption. In 2012, Council awarded 10-year permissive tax exemption to a number of organizations that lease city-owned property. As the 10-year permissive tax exemption are now expiring, staff are recommending that the organizations in this group have their permissive tax exemption extended for 2 years until 2024. And there's a full package as usual, but there's also a staff recommendation if somebody would like to move it. Councillor Lachtenberg and the both together, one at a time, okay. That the permissive tax exemption bylaw 3557 2022 be introduced and read a first and second time by title only. Moved by Councillor Lachtenberg and seconded by Councillor Renwick. Questions or comments? All in favour? Thank you. And number 2, that the permissive tax exemption bylaw number 3557, 2022, be read a third time by title only. Moved by Councillor Lachtenberg, seconded by Councillor Renwick. All in favour? Thank you very much. Okay. And number 10, A is gone, and we're on now to the financial updates. And there's a summary here, folks. And if you have any questions about the first one, you're welcome to speak now or forever hold your peace. There's a couple of highlights that I pulled off this that Chris might want to, Chris might want to.
Sure, I'll
Speak
do
to
a
it.
little kind of read through here on, so I don't know if I've kind of explained the format here. I think it's something that everybody's used to, but, you know, this is the update as of June 30th, 2022. So on the right side here, you've got, here's where we were at June 30th, 2021, and what the 2021 budget was. And on the left side, here's where we're at June 30th, 2022, and what our 2022 budget is. So I just picked off a few sort of highlights. I think in general, we're doing quite well, you know, considering last I looked, 7.5% inflation, starting to learn new terms like CPI trim and things like that hadn't heard of before. So it's a challenging time, but I think we're doing, you know, hats off to staff and, you know, Director of Public Works and things like that to be able to kind of look for ways that we can mitigate some of these costs. And our purchasing department's been fantastic too at looking for those projects that, you know, perhaps we can defer or where we can get best value. So, so just going through the revenue side, you know, we have our taxes. We had our tax increase plus new construction sort of gives us that 5% increase in taxes for 2022. You know, that's one that, you know, we do get a few grants in lieu and things like that that happen a little bit later, but for the most part, that's kind of where you'd expect to see things. Sale of services, you know, that includes our resource recovery fees. So we had a bit of an increase in our garbage rates in the year, so that's factored into there. You know, as we move into this post-COVID world, we've got increased budgets for some of these things like youth center camps and other revenues and things that we hope to kind of get things back to normal here. Investment income's higher than budgeted as we kind of have the higher interest rates. We have quite a few of our investments in high interest savings account. We do have investments with the MFA and the bond fund. Those are doing well from an interest rate point of view. We do have some paper losses on market value. You know, I think we're set up quite well on our investments that we don't need to be looking to liquidate any of those. So those are just, you know, on paper. As those investments mature and get rolled into higher earning bonds, then we kind of can take advantage of those higher rates. Yeah.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Yeah,
Through the chair.
Woodward, yeah.
So Chris, I was wondering, you know, we have our capital reserves and we, you know, at a very steady rate, we keep those capital reserves at a good place. I'm wondering, because of inflation, because of supply chain issues, because of different pressures that are being put on that, do you feel like our capital reserves are still holding in a good place that, you know, we don't have to do a tax increase when a huge asset replacement comes? Do you feel like that we're in a good zone?
Yeah, I don't see any of our reserves. You know, we do a good job of putting together 10, 15, 20-year plans, especially when we look at water and sewer. And we don't have places where those reserves get to the point where, you know, we're on a shoestring. We try to make sure that there's contingencies in there for things like this. And I'm hoping this inflation that we're seeing now is not something that's going to continue for 10, 15, 20 years, that it's sort of a short-term piece. So I wouldn't see any reason to be concerned. I think we've done a great job of planning up to this point and keeping those reserves healthy. And the investments that we have are invested in safe, interest-bearing instruments, so we get a higher return on those investments as well. So, yeah, I think we're set up comfortably.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Lackenberg.
Chris, thank you for this. Is there, you know, as I was going through it, I was looking for any sort of anomalies in terms of comparison with 2021. It, you know, and there were a few, but I assume in the end, they seem to come out in the wash. Is there anything that has your attention that you're watching that you're maybe a little concerned about?
Well, we'll kind of get in a little bit further down as I sort of go into some of the pieces. some of the things like protective services perhaps is something that, I can see they have some challenges that might become more evident as we get into the later half of the year. Because again, this is up till June 30th. And we're going to have our Director of Public Works come and just talk about sort of some of the inflationary things and the capital and those types of projects, hopefully at our next meeting, and just give us a general overview of where we're at with some of those things. And the types of things they're doing to, like I say, mitigate some of these risks. So I'm not seeing anything, up in this first half of the year that is of concern, but we've got our eye on a few things and just making sure that we're still, moving in the right direction. So, yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, so just moving on from investment income, I suppose one thing that jumps out is looking at the next line down, the grants unconditional. So normally we receive, our small communities grant after June 30th, and that's the case this year. But the province did provide all municipalities with a bit of a bonus payment this year, which was equal to roughly a quarter of what their regular small communities grant payment was. So we received that earlier in May, and that's not something we would think we would be receiving ongoing. It's just sort of a one-time bonus payment, and I wasn't able to get any clear indication from them on what the rationale of it was this year, but all the small communities got it. Grants conditional, these are things that will vary from year to year, just depending on the capital projects that we have on the go and the timing of when we receive grant funds. We got some funds last year for the pier and things like that up front, so those all show up sort of in your grant revenues, but they'll change depending on what sort of projects and grants we have on the go. And water and sewer and transit fees and things like that are moving along as expected. Most of the revenues here, I think, are, where you'd expect them to see. It's not quite the same as with expenses where you sort of expect that, hey, around halfway point in the year, you'll be at 50%. They seem to ebb and flow a little bit more, just depending on timing. You get your taxes earlier in the year, you get some of your grant revenues later in the year, that type of thing. So just looking at the expenses now, again, in a perfect world, you'd sort of see everything kind of around that 50% mark. So things are looking not too bad with percentage of budget remaining, just kind of being, that 52, 53, 54%. It's kind of a good place. General operating, we've got the Nelson Next team in there this year. A lot of those, or most of those, are covered by grants and EcoSave funding and things like that. We do have the new local government climate action plan. I think that we'll be hopefully seeing some of that come in later in the year, kind of that September, October period there. We'll get some initial funding for that for 3 years. Protective services that I spoke about earlier. Yep, sorry.
Sorry, Chris.
Yeah.
Just a comment from you. By having a climate action team solidified and ready to go, did that open doors for us to get further grant funding to do more mitigation?
Kevin might have some. Yeah.
No question. So we're ready to go. So anyone that's got money, they're going to go to places
That's the
where
theory.
they know they have qualified people that are able to deliver.
Yeah.
And we're in very good shape. I don't know if you want to add to that, Kevin, but we're in very good shape on that side.
Yeah, no, we're seeing it throughout the team. They've, having some dedicated resources and, especially a manager that's, able to look at some of those opportunities versus, delivering the program themselves has opened doors. I know Carmen just sent me a note today that there's another funding stream that they believe they've got secured after about 3-4 years of lobbying for that. Our CEF application has been under review by the FCM staff. She's feeling quite hopeful on that one. We're actually one of their model communities of that type of program. So yeah, they've been able to secure a number of grants. We recently had the Minister of here and Environment and Climate Change, I think it's called these days, and certainly was really impressed with with the resources that the city is committed to the program. And as Chris said, almost all of that has been either grant funded or paid through Nelson Hydro's energy efficiency program. And yeah, with this new funding stream, it will replace. We used the CARET funding from last year, as you recall, to bridge that and be able to make that happen this year. And with the new funding stream, that will secure those positions that we added.
Thank you.
On that note, it's worth keeping in mind that with having those folks in that department set up and ready to go and be able to access funds when they're made available, it also means that every other department in the city is engaged in that conversation as well. So this sort of filters through public works, fire, police, everybody's involved in that conversation to be able to help them build a case for accessing funds. So we're probably one of the leading cities in Canada when it comes to having our own group of people that are very well qualified, and not only qualified, but very passionate about what they're doing to be able to access funding in the senior levels of government.
Thank you.
I call it passionate and practical.
Yeah, yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. So, again, the protective services piece, we had in the budget here, we have our new deputy chief. They do have some challenges this year with staff and some folks being off, injured and unavailable for work. And so, they've done their best to kind of handle that internally by moving resources around and, taking advantage of virtual training opportunities as opposed to sending folks away and trying to keep that as tight as possible. So again, it's looking not too bad by Q2 here. We'll see how things shape up over the next few months and probably be reporting back to you in the next quarter with an update on that piece. The transportation services, you recall when we went through the budget process last year with this. Yeah, with this, with the snow, and here we are in September, and so we still got another bit of a snow season to come. But we did increase the budget for 2022 to kind of take into account all that snow. I don't know what we're calling it. Was it snow apocalypse? I don't know. Yeah, Snowmageddon. Thank you. Yes. Yes. So that's kind of worked into the transportation services piece there. That's the main driver of that one.
So Chris, that was one of the ones that I sort of circled myself.
Yes.
On. It's interesting because a number of people have asked myself and council here about snow removal, and there's a couple of key pieces here that need to be kept in mind. Like $740,000 is spent on snow removal for the first part of the year. And that's compared to $370,000 the previous year. And for us to carry, as an example, equipment and person power to be able to be sitting in the yard waiting to go to take on what we're not sure is going to happen just makes absolutely no sense at all to do that. And as Chris mentioned, because of the direction from here at the council table, they're adding a little bit of money each year just in case we get hammered once again. But we live on the side of a mountain in the snow belt in a community that, for the most part, snow is actually a good thing for the economy and the ski hills and everything else. So we have to sort of balance the $740,000 around where it should be, around $400,000, and it's not an easy thing to do because $740,000, that probably translates into, let me think, 7 twos or probably about a 7 or 8% tax increase just on its own. So for us to just go out there and grab another $740,000 each year and charge the taxpayer for it for something that we don't know is going to happen makes absolutely no sense. So we're going to have to be adapting and adjusting to these events, but we're going to need people to come on side with us, such as myself as a resident that needs to be helping to shovel their sidewalk or not dumping their snow out on the street after the plow goes by, etc. So we're all in this together, and we have two choices. One, we can work together on it, or it's going to cost more money to do it. Councillor Page.
Thanks, Mayor, for providing that landscape. in that conversation, it was also an area I had highlighted, but not one I necessarily saw as a budgetary consideration. Well, it is one, but not one to, now that we're talking about it. My question is, when we look at the ice and snow removal policy that we adopted last October, I want to say, perhaps as late as November, having gone through a year and operationalized that plan and tried it out, is that coming back in any shape and form? And for me, the top things are the fact that all priority sidewalk routes fall at the very bottom of all of the road priorities, or at least by my reading of it, and I would advocate that there should be at least a second tier of priority walking routes that do not wait until every single last alley road has been cleared before anyone has to action it. And the other piece is, you've touched on it, it's that community activation piece. Like, what programming do we have? We obviously, the Youth Center obviously has its Snow Angel programming, but we don't necessarily have a concerted effort to randomly go around and hand out tickets, as an example, to the residents that need to go shovel, to start to send the message that it's not just we're really asking you to shovel your walk, but like, there might be a little bit of a stick along the way if you don't actually shovel your walk, because until we get people taking care of their boulevards and taking care of their sidewalks, we're always going to have an uncomfortable walking environment, and we really need to change that expectation within the community. But I think it requires some level of programming and language within our ice and snow removal plan that actually tells us what we're trying to do and what departments will do it and how we're going to activate the rest of the community to take care of those sidewalks, aside from just asking at this table, which there needs to be a deeper program there. So is that something we can action?
Well, I'm certain a new council can certainly consider
Sure.
and consider that policy. Certainly, as part of the active transportation plan, you know, what sidewalks do we maintain ourselves? But I agree, the community, we can't maintain every sidewalk in the city. We do need the community to step up as well. But yeah, no, I think it would be certainly on the radar on the active transportation side. You know, I know Sebastian's been working with the operations department. We have as you know, a new director there, and I know he has some good ideas around snow removal, etc. So yeah, it's all policies are ones, you know, that's the work of council to, you know, does that fit with the vision that council and the community have, and we adjust to meet those targets. And so yes, we can certainly put it back on the table. Basically, as you heard from Director Innes at the time, really that policy update wasn't really a change in philosophy. It was just better documenting what we do at this time. So that was that's what that purpose at that time. It wasn't a full review of how we manage our streets and sidewalks at that time, but that's a policy discussion council should have.
Okay, Councillor Latimer.
Thank you, Mayor. So just on that, could we add this is not my question, but can we add electric snow blowers to the e-bike program as a pilot? Anyways, I'll put that out there for the next council. So then my question, Chris, is related to protective services. I know that, or I understand that we're going to have some burning in the interface this fall to continue to help build fire breaks around the city. We are seeing the end, from what I understand, the end of the El Nino by next year, and we're going to move in a La Nina, and we're going to move into an El Nino, which tends to bring a pretty intense fire seasons. Like the heat domes tend to associate with El Ninos and the fires that come with it. Is there, and I know this is a quarterly review, and the next council is going to go through a full budget process, but I would, in case I'm not here, would we be able to see some investment, maybe through our climate action team, at accessing and working even more with the province on accessing more funding to do that wildfire mitigation work?
Yeah, I think again, just just for clarity around our climate team, and that's why I call it the climate team, because I don't want them to take on every project in the city. So the, our emergency management program runs our fire mitigation work, our fire and the fire department, the Fire Smart program. So pretty well all the fire mitigation work that's been done is grant funded through the UBCM and that program. I think we've been extremely successful at getting these grants, and certainly our climate team looks for opportunities for all departments to move our plan forward. So certainly, they will give you an update of where we're at on that type of work, what's next. One of the projects we're trying to move forward is actually working with Wildfire BC, Ministry of Forests, on actually really being proactive on how we defend our community. Where are those key breaks? Where can they get a foothold in the event we have a fire in our community? I think it was pretty heartening, I wouldn't say comforting, to see the fast response to those fires that were around us. And what does that look like in a big fire year where the resources are a lot more stretched than they are now? Those are the things I think we need to understand. We're looking at this comprehensively. What do we do with our water supply? As you know, we're looking at being able to pump out of the lake. Does that give us enough supply that we could have sprinklers or on the perimeter of our community? So we want to look at this cohesively, because I don't think it's not just the fuel mitigation work we're doing. It's that bigger look at water supply, how a fire could be attacked, where we create these footholds, where the likely fire comes into Nelson from, all those things. So I think that's definitely on the radar. As you know, we have some our previous fire chief recently resigned and retired, and we have a new fire chief, emergency management director, just getting up to speed. So it's definitely on the radar, and like I said, I think it's bigger than just focusing on one area of how you protect your community.
Well, on that note, I just wanted to add a couple of things to what Kevin had to say. So the fire chief and I and director of emergency management attended a meeting with the BC Forest Service in June to have this very conversation. And some of the challenges are regional. They're out of our jurisdiction, as an example, and time. We don't have time. The reality is we need to be planning, and to be able to plan. It's one thing to plan, this whole other thing to convince people to buy into the plan. As an example, and there was an example of it this year, we know from the conversations we've been having with the BC Forest Service and wildfire, the threat to our community is coming in from the west. So through Blewett, and there was a large fire just up at Rover Creek this year. So that's not that far from.
They're still fighting it today.
See,
They
that's
flew
not
over my
that far
house
from
this morning.
Blewett. And so we've done a lot of work up on this side of the city, but there's absolutely nothing happening on that side.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know how many people in this room remember the big W on the side of the mountain up there, but we may be looking at another big W to protect the people of Blewett and the city of Nelson going forward. And people are going to have to realize that to be a fire smart community and a community that complies with fire regulations and the threat that's coming at us, it's going to mean including private landowners, the Ministry of Forests, and people willing to deal with what we've done at Salis Creek, in the park up at West Arm Park, and with the private landowners up in Mountain Station and so forth. We're going to have to deal with that kind of sight lines going forward to fully protect this community. That's our biggest threat right now, is Blewett.
Yeah.
And it's the first place that's going to get hit, of course, is Blewett.
Yeah.
And then Nelson's the next threat after. And the Rover Creek fire was a prime example of that just happened this summer. And it seems like it might never happen, but in actual fact, there's an example of it right there.
Well, and Mayor, on that note, I mean, this was supposed to be a low fire year, and we had a number of fires within
Exactly.
just a few kilometers of the city. My concern is if we get to a high fire season, and I think they're only going to get worse, and if El Nino is next year might be the big one, in which case, should we be, and I think you've answered that to a degree, but I'd encourage us to maybe continue to think about building up reserves for pre-positioning assets, like maybe we develop a contract that allows us to hold a helicopter in case every asset is out fighting fires in other places, and we have something at least kind of pre-positioned here that we're taking a little bit more proactive approach in things that would probably be out of our jurisdiction usually, but I'm just concerned that in the big years, when all the resources are everywhere else, we might be left
I
at the
think
bottom
in
of the list.
A big year, the province will declare a state of emergency, and we'll be able to control that equipment how they choose to control it anyway. So,
Any of it.
yeah, I don't think this is something you tackle on your own. This is how you have to tackle it with, the prime agency responsible for wildfire, the other partners, private landowners. I think that's a lobbying thing to do for the province. Right now, you can't use that wildfire mitigation money on private lands. So I think there's some lobbying work that has to be done. I think there's, and we're hoping if we develop this plan and show here's where our risks are, the risks are on private lands. Hopefully we'd make some headway with government to say, why wouldn't you deal with the biggest risk? What's the point of us doing mitigation work up where we're not at risk when we know we're at risk here, and this would be the sensible place to do that. I think everyone's aware there's been some small grants by both the regional district and the city to private landowners, and the province has approved that as part of the wildfire mitigation. I think they're 500 to
Annually,
yeah. So
not at one time, which I just learned, yeah.
okay, yeah, so that's a start in the right direction. I think if we can prove that's been effective, but I think you need to build out that plan and really understand where your risks are, because we live in a forest. You can't deal with everything unless you went back to the early 1900s and burnt the whole hillside down.
So we had two examples this year.
Then you have slides.
With Rover Creek and Pulpit Rock.
Yeah.
Rest of Johnson Road, Ridgewood Road,
6 Mile.
6 Mile as an example. So leaving that meeting that we had 2 months ago, one of the actions coming out of that was in the fall, there was supposed to be meetings held at Tagham Hall, Blewett Fire Hall, in Nelson, and the North Shore Hall as well. Just to get people engaged and understand where the threats are, and see if we can't build some better understanding in the public that, you can't deal with these things the day they happen. You got to be ahead of them by months, in fact years, to be able to mitigate some of the loss, potential loss. So thanks for bringing that up. So that's really good. Light a fire under some people here. Get something going.
Did that come up with snow plowing somehow?
Yeah.
Protective services.
Find
Yeah.
our ways.
See what you started here, Chris?
Environmental health services is basically our garbage. We've got the organics diversion, resource recovery, yes. But includes our organics diversion program in there too. And I think we're working on a few things here to get that rolled out shortly. We're close to having some things finalized there.
Chris, I just want to speak to that
Yeah.
for a minute, because a few people have called me about garbage smells as an example, and bi-weekly garbage pickup. And, we feel fairly confident with the conversations we've had as a council with our staff, that if we can get this organics program rolled out in the next year and a half or so, that we'll eliminate that product from the garbage, which eliminates the smell, and it'll be, when we get the program rolled out, the composting system that we're putting in place for the community will deal with that at the source, which is on the kitchen counter actually. And, we're really excited about that program. So, people just bear with the council for the next year or so, year and a half, until that rolls out. You're going to find a huge difference in your smell of your garbage. Now, having said that, it's council's prerogative to go back to weekly garbage pickup, but again, there's a cost attached to that as well. So people are willing to pay that cost. You could pick garbage up every day if you wanted to. There's always a cost attached to everything. So, yeah, Councillor Pate.
Looking at the kind of like holistic approach to that concern, are we earmarking any monies to bring back bear-proof bins and implement a bear-proof bin program to make them accessible? Because there certainly are a lot of people asking for that to return.
We haven't, we ran it that 1 year, and I think that was a lot to do with Dave White, our Wild Safe coordinator at the time. He helped coordinate all that. We warehoused that. It was, a fair amount of work by ourselves. Certainly would we be interested if another party wanted to partner around that? Likely. I do agree with the mayor. Once we get that organics out of the waste stream, that should, and that was, should be a big driver of reducing all those conflicts that we're seeing. And I think one of in the pilot on the food cycler, the consistent feedback was, concern of rats, skunks, raccoons, bears, etc. And that's seen as a real positive for the program, getting that material out of the people's garbage spaces. People, I guess, still have fruit trees, etc. I don't know the garbage bins would look at that, but I just think we need to think about it in terms of rolling out the food cyclers. They're not inexpensive, but certainly, we'll give some thought. We could maybe look at, taking those orders and making a larger or consolidated order, and people, would just get them delivered centrally, and people would come pick them up, as opposed to us last time we bought a bunch and then resold them over time. Maybe that would simplify it. We could certainly look at that.
Councillor Morrison.
Yeah, no, I just agree with what Councillor Page has just said there, in terms of a number of people have asked me, only because there's so many bears in the city currently, about, oh, my neighbor has one of those bear cans, where do I get one? And I go, well, I think we've sold them all now in the city, and I think that there should be a little bit of thought given to that. And as much as I love my food cycler, and I believe that Councillor Page has one as well, it doesn't take care of my beef bones and other large bones. So there is that issue of what are you doing with that. Now, I happen to live in a house that I have room for a freezer and stuff, and so I keep all my bones there for the 2 weeks before garbage pickup. So I've never had a bear in my garbage can. But I think that we have to also be cognizant of the fact that there will be a certain amount of garbage that still can't be processed in the food cycler. I know one of the biggest things that I throw out is greasy paper towels. I mean, and I know that you can put a little bit of paper through your food cycler, but probably not the extent that I use mine. And so that's got the bacon grease or the whatever. It's got the lovely bear smells, I think, in it. So I agree with Councillor Page in that fact that we have to sort of get some balance. And I don't like it when I see there's a live bear trap set up actually 2 blocks before my house right now, which is really starting to move into the interior part of the city. I mean, so yeah, I think we have to make sure we cover all of the bases while we try to protect the wildlife in the area.
Perfect.
I think the new ones do bones.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, from what I understand, the new food cyclers can
We'll
handle
do a
bones.
bit of paper, yeah. And some bones, but
And some bones.
Not dinosaur bones, I heard.
Dinosaurs, yeah. Fred Flintstone.
Yeah, next one on here, public wealth and health and welfare.
Chris, I'm
Yep,
going
sorry.
to ask you,
Yeah,
I mean, I'm happy with what you're doing, but
Yes.
we've been at this for an hour.
Yep. You want me to
So-
skip to the juicy parts?
I don't know if you need to skip, but I'm just thinking,
Yeah,
you know,
I get you.
like, anyway. it's
Yeah.
just-
Yeah.
Not to say we need to go home. I'm happy to sit
Yeah,
for here
yeah.
and talk, but just say.
Let me touch on this one, and we'll go to a few capital pieces, because I think the rest of the operating is, like I say, everything is looking in line with where we expect. So this is maybe one that jumped out at me, though, just based on its small dollar values, so it doesn't take a lot to tip this over, where you look at it and go, you know, what's going on here. They did a lot of irrigation repair and maintenance up at the cemetery that in the spring. You know, also having burial services opened up again, so that's kind of got more folks out and a little bit more of a need to get things in tip-top shape up there. So that's what we're seeing as a little bit ahead of budget, is where I'd expect this time of year anyway. So yeah, just going down maybe to the capital pieces and looking at some of the highlights there. Like I mentioned, we'll have Director Innes come and speak to some of the things that we're seeing with the Hall Street Pier, and you know, possibly talk about some of the other areas as well, Cottonwood Park, and it's given us an update on some of those larger capital projects. The Civic Center, we are still engaged with the consultant, giving us a bit of information on budget, and we did have a meeting with them, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago to talk about different delivery methods for the project, and kind of looking into some of the more, I'd say not modern, but progressive ways of doing that look interesting. You know, moving into the water and sewer, most of the water main upgrades for this year are focused around what will be the new health campus, and putting in some extra capacity there, some new fire hydrants, better fire service up there. Those will be offset, those costs will be offset with some charges to developers to make that happen. And on the sewer side, main thing is the sewer master plan. We're still waiting on that, which should come out this fall, and it'll give us a bit more of a guidance on, you know, how we move forward with some of the things in the water, or in the wastewater side of things. In hydro, we've got the Mill Street substation. The transformers have been ordered for that, and they're expected later in this fall. Decommissioning of some of the old transformers there. We will be coming soon to council this month, actually, with what our 2023 budget's going to look like. So we'll get Director Spencer to come and talk about that, and some of the projects that are straddling this year and next year, and then some of the new ones for 2023, and sort of where we're seeing things as far as a rate increase or what things will look like for next year. So he'll come and speak to that, I think, later on this month. But he's moving ahead with some of these projects that we talked about, the asset management plan, some of the planning side of things, advanced metering infrastructure. Those are both still in the planning stages of getting, some feedback on a business plan and where we sit with moving ahead with those projects. So again, those are things that'll be coming later in the year, and I imagine he'll be checking back with us and reporting on those findings. There. Not bad, right?
Thank you.
Pretty good.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you very much, Chris. That's Chris. So would somebody like to move receipt of the report? Councillor Charwood and Councillor Woodward, all in favour? Thank you very much. Okay, next is reports. And we have you're on the stage again there, if you wish, Chris. We have accounts payable and building permit stats, so that'll be Sebastian there. So unless there's something somebody wanted to pick out of the pile here.
I'll move receipt.
Move receipt by Councillor Page, second by Councillor Morrison. All in favour? Carried. Thanks very much. The next one.
Yeah, I think we should just, recognize, our building stats are at record levels, and those do not include some of those larger projects, such as the Kulos development, Mount St. Francis, etc. I think Vernon Street here. So we are in an extremely busy construction and development period, and we have some very large projects coming up, some of the largest that the city's ever seen. So so our folks are flat out on a lot of those projects, and also stick handling, a number of the smaller things from signage to Cottonwood
Backyard
Park
decks.
to one of our planners now has some design skills, and for example did the design here for Lakeside or Lake Street there with some landscaping and sidewalks on that side of Lake Street. I think you saw the work that was done at Cottonwood Park for how we create better parking and circulation there as well. So that was all done in-house as well.
And now you know why the hair is standing on Sebastian's head over there. Councillor Woodward.
Thank you, Mayor. I was wondering if there's a comparable to where we're at in terms of a building boom, or obviously in a building boom now, and the city is bubbling along quite nicely. I'm wondering, is there a comparable, or are we kind of in a different zone than we have been as a city?
Probably the mining boom in 1898.
So we're really in a different place.
Yeah, we have never seen this,
We're open for
especially those
business,
large projects that.
Yeah.
and people are showing up and want to be here, and it's working for.
Yeah.
A lot of carpenters are employed these days, and plumbers and electricians, and unemployment rate's one of the lowest we've ever had in the city of Nelson right now. So it's good for working people.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Page.
Yeah, I didn't want to lose, I probably moved that a little soon. I didn't want to lose the report from the Director of Corporate Services about the electric records management project. And I thought maybe we would get a little bit of an update from, give us a verbalization of this report.
Well, I can give you an update today. Lisa was hauling cartons and cartons and cartons of of files out of here on a trolley right there. Where are they going? Where are they going to, Sarah?
So, well, she's been doing that for,
Days.
well, since June now,
Yeah.
right? So we've started the pilot project with Development Services historical records, property files, and we started by shipping off 5 boxes of property files to a company called Microcom, and they're down on the lower mainland, and they have been scanning in these property files. Lisa, who's the records management coordinator, has created these lists these lists and lists of property files that then go down to Microcom along with the boxes, and they're correlated, and then the digital files are sent back on a stick, and we are required, we can't just dispose of those records because they're historical property files. They have to be kept in perpetuity, sadly, but they do. So, but we now have them on a stick, digitized, and they are searchable and quite easily accessible by staff, which is fantastic, because between development services and sometimes corporate services, we are looking for records all the time. We're going back to them. So the first 5 boxes, the very sort of first batch of records has been sent and received back, and it's all great. Lisa's done a fantastic job of getting them set up and organized. So she's almost through all of the records, all of the property files, other than the building plans, which tend to be quite large. So she's got everything going back down, all the remaining records, historical records, going back down to Microcom to be scanned in, digitized. She's, again, made her Excel spreadsheets. They come back, they're searchable, they are everything that we need them to be. And so now what that means is once we have the building plans scanned in as well and sent back to us, it means that we'll be able to store all of those historical records somewhere because we can access them digitally. Much easier, they're safer, and smaller.
Faster.
Way faster. In the meantime, so while she's got months of scanning to go back down to microcom, she's coming up with a plan in collaboration with Development Services and myself to figure out how what kind of plan do we need so that we start with the digital document. We don't start with a hard copy and a wet signature, have to scan it in, store it, file it, and then we still have to keep this original copy. So the group of us are coming up with a bit of a plan. Dev Services is a perfect department to start with, and because they do so much digitally already. So once we have Development Services up and running and completely organized, we'll move on to another department, which we haven't quite decided on yet, but yeah, we're getting there.
Councillor Morrison.
So just to follow up, so did I clearly hear you say that there does come a point in time when we will not put this piece of paper today in a box, have it digitized, but still have to store it? So that there'll come a time when we don't have to store current or new generated
It
documents.
won't be, some very few documents will be required to be original hard copy documents, but there are still some that are required to be paper copies. The plan is that we do this digital transformation and everything is done electronically. So special event permits, building permits, all that kind of thing, complaint forms, like whatever is all done digitally, and that becomes our original copy.
Okay, sir. Thanks very much. Okay, next one up is minutes. Housing Committee, there's two of those, June 23rd and July the 8th. And there was just one thing that sort of jumped out at me. Councillor Page, you might be able to answer this. A possibility of having Nelson Housing Committee join the Workforce Housing Committee that is being assembled. I remember when the Housing Committee was first established, the idea was that was the umbrella for housing. And I'm wondering, are we going to have two housing committees now, or are they going to be a subcommittee of the Housing Committee, or what does that look like?
Well, this was discussion being had earlier this summer while the NADP was focused on developing actions from an economic development standpoint around workforce housing. And so being that the charge here at the table at the time, well, the table leading up to that was to try to have those conversations inside of a regional context body. That's where we kind of elevated more of those conversations at the NADP. But there was some cross-pollination that people were talking about at the time. It wasn't something that we chased down at the moment. We focused in on some of the data points, working with the staff liaison there for Rhiannon, is just figuring out a little bit more clarity around the data and the need and what demographics are being most greatly impacted, while the NADP is still focused on the actual coordination piece of getting some workforce housing projects out the chute itself. The Housing Committee at the moment sees its role as trying to get better clarity on the data and where exactly there is abject need. At some point, if we get to a place where there's a nonprofit housing delivery partner, like as BC Housing has put forward to us before, that they like to see someone in the area who's just focused on nonprofit housing as their core mission. There is a conversation at our most recent Housing Committee about what the clarity of that governance model looks like. Like, there's still ideas around the table that from a local government perspective, a Housing Committee is a place to bring some of that planning and master planning and overarching look. And we've talked about, does that sit at the RDCK? Does it sit at Nelson? But at the same time, if there is a society of some sort that is formed, following the Revel-Stoke model or the Whistler model, that takes on the actual building, development, and operation of that housing, that those are because there's still distinctions there, and it's good to get good clarity about what those distinctions are, what the terms of reference might change to, and how there's not overlap, but there's coordination, so that, you know, between government and the nonprofit society, that things are effective. There's a grander understanding of the features of the market, as it were, and how it's performing.
So Nelson Cares would be an example of more or less what you're talking about. It'd be a standalone.
I think we always want. I don't know if you've heard me give this speech before, but I give it to a few people. I think we always have to be careful about nominating particular organizations to provide housing, even though they may have in the past done that, because it's not really a fit for social sector organizations to then also see the need become so underserved that they step forward and start doing the same thing. There was a huge stretch there that doesn't necessarily fit with them on a long-term basis and what they're trying to accomplish. So I would just caution us strongly not to nominate organizations, because, you know, same would be with the fellowship or anybody else, but, you know.
So just in terms of that, so the conversation that we've had between the RDCK and the city, the Economic Development Partnership, to get this, do this initial review. So the, Janice, you're probably aware that the RDCK has hired Magola to look at housing in the rural areas only. And we are going to hire that same company on a not to do a specific defined piece of work, but rather more on a hourly basis to understand what those challenges and opportunities are, and that would involve everything from what Councillor Page says, is there resource capacity at existing nonprofits that have delivered housing in the past? Is that their mandate or not their mandate? Who else is there? You know, what are the challenges and opportunities? So all those things, the idea is to really have an open mind, I guess, and without us presetting what that might look like, have the experts in that field look at our community, look at those, the opportunities and, the assets and challenges that we have in our community. Nelson Cares got into housing because they took on a housing society. That's the history of why Nelson Cares is involved in delivering housing, is because, what was it called before? The Nelson...
Oh, yeah, they couldn't get anybody to join anymore. I forget what they're called.
So they're the ones that built, the rent or the low-cost housing up at Rosemont, and they managed all those projects and ultimately ran out of capacity to properly manage those projects. So those are all definitely important things to understand, and that's the work that will be done to do that work up front and make sure this is set up for success, or at least understand what we need to make this happen. It's not the short game, it's a long game. It took even Whistler 20 years to get anywhere where they're actually managing housing projects. It takes getting into the game, and it takes time for it to build to a place where it can sustain itself. And I was really comfortable with the consultant and the breadth of knowledge they have across BC and what projects they've worked on. They've worked with communities like Tofino, etc. And Tofino's been involved for something like 15 plus years and looking at delivering their first project now. So it's not unfortunately not a short-term solution, but something that that a lot of communities are looking at and getting involved. It's unfortunate a bit that, you don't tend to get in the game until after you have a kind of housing and pricing crunch that now makes it even tougher to get into the game. So, but that's where we're at. I think there's a strong collaboration between, we're using the same consultant. There's a strong desire by both parties and, well, all parties to, to really understand this and look for opportunities.
Good.
I think, if I may, just to bring forward, like, it's not in these minutes, but it will be in future ones. We had presentations from the Revelstoke Community Housing Society, Community Services Housing Society, which interestingly had also been brought into the game around the time of Tofino. They were both brought into existence. And one of the things that was really strongly reflected from those organizers is they had originally formed and they've been provided a $100,000 a year budget to operate for the first years to get projects going. But the provincial and federal funding stack was not, they did not find it sufficient to tackle the kinds of projects that they felt they needed to tackle for various reasons, from scope and scale to just alignment with what the kinds of needs they were seeing in their community. It's only been in the last few years, where their most recent project has come online, that they've been able to access those upper levels of government for funding, because those models have changed and that thinking has changed. But they were wandering the desert. They got cut off from funding after a few years for not really making the progress and the council today had shifted, but they essentially ended up wandering the desert for a good 10 years before things, before the rains came and they could start to action those projects. So the sooner we get that clarity and start down this path, maybe we can make it in 5 or 7, but the reality is these are things we need to start, because they're going to take some time to achieve, and so we got to get there.
Thank you. Okay, no further questions there. Motion to receive the minutes. Councillor Woodward, second by Councillor Latimer, all in favour? Thank you. No notice of motion, no late items, no in-camera items to be released to the public. Resolution to adjourn. Councillor Renwick and Councillor Woodward, all in favour? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks.